Atreides! 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 The Atreides chant is so cool. So I've seen Dune Part 1 4 times at the cinema. That is the most amount of viewings I've ever had of a film in the cinema. Like, I love this movie so much. To me, it reinvigorated my passion and my love for cinema. Like, to me, that's how movies should be made. Practical, on set, CGI to help supplement the practical effects. Just, God, Denis, ugh. I loved Dune Part 1. Though I will say, leaving the cinema, my biggest complaint at the time was the ending. I was like, why was it so abrupt? Because it did feel abrupt. But having seen the film 4 times now, the ending to the film no longer feels abrupt to me. In fact, I've learned to love the ending. Right from the get-go, the film's title card lets you know that this is Dune Part 1. This is only the beginning. I mean, that's also the last line of the film. This is only the beginning.
This is only the beginning.
The overarching story itself will not be completed, but by the end of the film, the characters' arcs and the character's journey will at least be completed. Specifically Paul's. Paul's arc in this film is essentially boiled down to kill the boy and let the man be born. I mean, Maester Raymond got the quote wrong. It's actually kill the boy and let the Chad be born, but you know.
Right.
And that arc is solidified by the Jamis fight at the end of the film. The fight itself to me adds a much needed momentum for the finale of the film, because after the big battle of Arrakeen and Paul and Jessica on the run, when they get out of the still tent and they are just, you know, wading through the desert and then they run into the sandworm, to me that stuff of the film is actually where the film slows down a bit and I'm losing a bit of interest. It's too quiet, it's too dark, it's too silent, and I'm like, nothing's really happening. They are just walking through the desert. I mean, yes, we see the big sandworm and oh my god, the sandworm looks really cool, but it's not really an action scene. It's just, we're just walking through the desert doing the sandwalk. But when Paul runs into the Fremen, to me, that's when the film kicks up, because actually something is finally happening. Plus also we get more of Javier Bardem as Stilgar, and just, I love his voice. You will only waste your body's water. I love his accent.
Do not run. You will only waste your body's water, 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 water.
And then, of course, we finally get to the big fight between Paul and Jamis, and to me, I think the fight itself is very good. I feel like at times it may have been cut a little bit too quickly, but it's not nauseating. You can see what's going on. I mean, I have heard complaints of people going, oh, the fight's too short. I'm like, it's a knife fight. Knife fights in real life do not last very long. An adaptation change I really like is the idea that Stilgar thinks Paul is toying with Jamis. I mean, he does think that in the book, because obviously in the book, Paul is so used to fighting with a shield and he gets to attack more slowly that Stilgar thinks Paul is toying with him. But in the movie, it's because Paul is so hesitant to killing Jamis because he's never killed anyone before. That, to me, was a really great change. By making Paul more hesitant to kill, it really just accentuates the character arc of kill the boy and let the man be born. May thy knife chip and shatter. Honestly, the actor who played Jamis is really good, and Timothée Chalamet and the actor who plays Jamis go all in on this scene. They are both amazing. Like, the actor who plays Jamis, he's like beating his side, like, you know, psyching himself up like a raging bull. Speaking of bulls, the scene actually thematically pays off the bull motif we see throughout the film, because Jamis in this fight is essentially a raging bull, and Paul is able to kill him by evading him and stabbing him in the back, like a bull. It's genius. Denis Villeneuve, you've made cinema. But actually, one of my favourite bits is when Paul manages to dodge Jamis and he has the knife at his throat and he's like, do you yield? Do you yield? The way Chalamet delivers that line, you really feel Paul's like, I don't want to kill you, just please yield. Fashi, fashi.
Fashi, fashi. The boy doesn't know our rules.
And when Paul finally does the deed and kills Jamis, you feel it. The change in the score, Hans Zimmer playing the Kwisatz Haderach theme, you know, the Yokida. He plays that in a much darker tone, and it really just accentuates the character arc. This is finally Paul becoming a man. One of the things that Denis Villeneuve has said in interviews is that when working with Timothée Chalamet's hair in itself is its own character. And honestly, he isn't wrong. The moment where Paul finally kills Jamis, he gets up, he walks on when the Fremen are all like, you know, touching his shoulder, and his hair just perfectly falls down across his eyes to make him look darker and more broodier and more of a man. Like, honestly, it's so perfect. It's too perfect, in fact. Like, that had to have been planned. Honestly, one of the great things about this fight is that it just proves that Denis Villeneuve understands the source material. He clearly loves the source material because using Jameis as this figurehead to help explain to the audience how prescience is an unreliable power is great. Throughout the film, we see the visions of Jameis, and he seems to be a friendly, mentor-like figure, but when we actually meet him, he is antagonistic. He is, you know, a warrior, brutal, and it just shows how unreliable prescience is, because, I mean, maybe in a possible future, if Paul treaded lightly, him and Jameis could have been friends, and Jameis would have taught him the way of the desert, but that isn't how it happens. Honestly, it's such a good representation of the power from the books. Also, the visions Paul has of Jameis actually killing him in combat is taken straight from the book, since in the books, Paul has this vision of, oh, if I continue down this path, I will die. So it's either my life or billions of others in the future. Also, it once again is a visual motif of kill the boy and let the man be born. I mean, rise, Kwisatz Haderach, rise. So yes, Paul has killed Jameis, and his arc is almost complete. He makes one final decision, and that is to go with the Fremen into the desert. That right there is the moment where Paul completes his arc. Throughout the movie, especially the beginning, he is an unsure teen of, he doesn't know if he's worthy enough to lead House Atreides, he doesn't know if he's going to be a good leader, if he's going to be a great man, and the film ends with Paul not questioning himself, but instead making an executive decision, like a leader. The final scene of the film is then Paul and Jessica walking off into the desert with the Fremen. They see the sandworm. Desert power.
Desert power.
Desert power. Chani then tells Paul that this is only the beginning as she walks off. We then see Paul smile, a little smitten, obviously implying their future romance. And the way Hans Zimmer scores the scene is wonderful. The track My Road Leads Into the Desert is actually a much more uplifting version of the Herald of the Change theme we hear at the very beginning of the film when we meet Paul. It really helps to carry the scene. It's a build-up. It lets the audience know there are bigger things to come. This is only the beginning, and it's only going to get bigger from here. I think it's a wonderful way to end the film, cutting straight to black. It's amazing. So yes, this is how I learned to love the ending of Dune Part 1. It isn't necessarily a clean ending like most films. Instead, it's very much a cliffhanger, but it also gives you the necessary character growth and character arc for your main characters. So yes, that is how I learned to love the ending of Dune Part 1. It isn't necessarily an end of a story, but instead it's the end of a character arc. If you look at the grand scheme of things and you look at the source material, the way the movie has split the book in half is quite clean, actually. Dune Part 1 shows us the growth of Paul Atreides as a person, but compared to his grander story in the Dune saga, specifically the first Dune novel, he's had half an arc. But I have no doubt we will see the completion of Paul Atreides' arc and the original Dune story done justice in Dune Part 2. But that's all I've got for you today. That is how I learned to love Dune Part 1. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on social media, all that good stuff. And until we meet again, see you guys next time.